Hello everyone and welcome to another Ogre workshop. Today we're talking about meters. Meters is a word that is not always well understood by everyone. And also sometimes it gets confused with these 5 other words that I'm putting on the screen at the moment. Tempo, time signature, beat, measure, rhythm, all words that sometimes get thrown in the same pot, but they all have slightly different meaning. Let's start with 2 of those. I want to talk about tempo first. But tempo means the speed of the music. It doesn't have any other influence in terms of the metrics of the time involved. It's just how fast the music is. Sometimes we use the Italian terms allegro, lento, moderato to describe the speed of the music, or sometimes we just say it's fast, it's slow. It's solely a descriptor for speed. The other one, rhythm. Usually by rhythm we mean specific note values. And so the ratio between the values of notes. So notes are longer, whole notes, half notes. Some are shorter, some are very short, like 30-second notes or 64th notes. But that's usually what we mean by rhythm. It also means the combination of those notes together can be a rhythm. Let's now talk about the other 4 words I had on the screen. Beat, time signature, measure, and meters. To help me, I have this little musical example. Consists of 4 measures. First word we'll talk about is measure. I think pretty much everyone watching this will know what a measure is. It's these sections of music that are all equal in length. And that's actually where the word comes from. They've been measured to be the same. In this case, they've each got 4 beats, and after 4 beats you put a bar line, move on to the next bar. Helps us keep track of where we are in the music. It organizes it in a certain way, so that it's not too hard to keep track of where you are. Sometimes we call them bars, sometimes measures. 2 words are complete synonyms. The next part is time signature. It's those 2 numbers right next to the clef usually. And it looks like a fraction. And what they tell you, those numbers tell you exactly what a measure is like. So they're supposed to tell you how many beats, in this case 4, and what they're worth, in this case quarter notes, so 4 quarters. It's like a fraction in that way. We'll talk about it a little more. The number, the time signature, the numbers are supposed to be a visual representation of what the meter is. As we'll see later, it's not always perfect, but it's usually a good indication. Beats are the smallest layer of organization that we have in music, and they're always equal in length. It's a pulse. Beats are equivalent to a pulse. So this pulse repeats, in this case, 4 times a measure. We can use all of these different things that I'm talking about, beats and measures and the time signature. They are different layers of organization. Beat is the smallest one, measure, and then we can go to phrases and sections, which are outside the scope of what we're talking about today. But a meter, basically, is the combination of those measures and beats. And it's a framework for the rhythms that come in them. So the repetitiveness of the beats and of the measure help you understand all of those rhythms that are put into the meter. On to time signatures. I'm sure many of you have seen different time signatures. Here on the screen there's 5/4, 2/2, 7/8, 2/4, 3/2, 4/4. There's many more. There's 6/8, 9/8, 12/8. The 2 numbers in time signatures, as I said in the previous slide. The top number is supposed to be the number of beats, and it nearly always is. And the bottom one is supposed to tell you the length of the beat. So the top one is fairly simple, a number of beats, they put a number down. The bottom one, they tell you a length, but they put a number down. Is it seconds? What is it? And it actually is just a representation of a note value, equal to the fractions that relate to those note values, because they're all fractions. A whole note would be 1. And a half note would be half, so as the numbers on the bottom, it's like as if you're talking halves. And then quarter notes, which is the most used one, 8th note, and so on. You can go to 16, you can go to 32, 64. In the perfect world, that would always be the case, and there would be no question about exactly what time signatures mean. Let's now talk about simple meters. Before we define simple meters, I want to show you a few examples. 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. You've seen these time signatures, these meters before. Different number of beats. Quarter note is the beat value. They're the most common beats, or not beats, sorry, the most common time signatures we'll see. I'll rewrite them here just for sake of explanation as 2 chord notes, 3 chord notes, 4 chord notes. Instead of 2-4, 3-4, 4-4, means the same thing. 2 beats of chord notes, 3 beats, 4 beats, all worth chord notes. And before we move on, I'm sure you already know that a chord note is equal to 2 eighth notes, which means that each of those beats can be split into equal parts. Those 2 equal parts, we call them subdivisions. I mentioned subdivisions in the previous workshop I did on how to practice with a metronome. So if you want to refer to that one to better understand subdivisions, you can. But here we have 2 subdivisions in every beat. That actually is the point of simple meter. A simple meter is a meter where the beat is divided in 2 equal parts. In this case, it would be 8 notes. A good example for this is the children's song Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. You got 4 beats, and each of those beats is divided into 8 notes. As you notice, not every beat actually has 2 8 notes in the music, but you could still count them. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... You can always count all the subdivisions, whether they're part of the rhythm of the piece or not. Other examples for simple meter could be 2-2, which is 2 beats of half notes. The simple meter we just saw is probably very intuitive for most of you because this is how music is usually taught. It's one of the first few things we teach about music. The next one, compound meter, gets a little more difficult. Not because it is inherently more difficult, it's just because it's got some notational issues, which we'll talk about in a second, but also we don't tend to teach it as quickly, as early to people who learn music. So examples of compound meters, 6/8, 9/8, 12/8, you might be like, I've seen this before, and you probably did. Now if we go back to the way I explained time signatures, the first one would be 6 beats of 8 notes. But in practice, 6/8 is not usually 6 beats worth 8 notes. It's usually 2 beats, and they're each worth a dotted quarter. You might know this, dotted quarter equals 3 8 notes. Here, and this is what actually defines compound meter, each beat is divided into 3 equal parts, in this case 3 8 notes. The problem is the dotted chord note does have a number that we can easily use for the denominator of a fraction. So we go to the next smallest note and triple the top number, and we get something that works. So 2 beats of dotted quarter, 6/8. 3 beats of dotted quarter would be 9/8, and then 12/8 for 4 beats. I think it should be written like this: the number of beats over the value of a beat. But you can only do this if you use note values. There's no number that works well. So I think this is one of the problems with compound meter. And just to describe it a bit simply, here's an example. You all know this piece. Row, row, row your boat is in compound meter. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3. For explanation, I did do the second line as counting instead of lyrics. That third measure showcases exactly what happens in compound meter. Each beat, merrily, 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 each beat is 3 notes. The pulse that goes on, the subdivision pulse of 3 8 notes that goes on throughout the whole thing, is still present. But again, this is the difference between meter and rhythm. The rhythm can be slower than the subdivision, than the meter. The meter is still the framework around which those rhythms are organized. Here, this is our framework. Everything is put on top of that. You'll notice that the numerator, the top number in compound meter, is always a multiple of 3, because we always take the number of beats times the 3 to put in the time signature. To further demonstrate the difference between simple meter and compound meter, I want to use 6/8 and 3/4 as my 2 examples. So these meters are different, these time signatures are different, but as you can see, both measures comprise of 6 8 notes. Well, on one end, we said that 6/8 is 2 beats of 3 8 notes. So you've got 2 beats in every bar, and they're worth 3 8 notes. 3/4, 3 beats, 2 8 notes. they're grouped differently. 6/8 is 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. I kept the 8th note the same tempo, so the bar is the same length. But you'll notice the beats are not the same length, because the first one, 3/8 notes, the second one is 2/8 notes. If I put them above each other, you'll see they're the same length, but they're grouped differently, and this is what is important, is the grouping of the notes, where the strong notes are, where the weak notes are. Also, you'll notice the beaming, the way the notes are tied together, is different. We're grouping them in 3 for 6/8, we're grouping them in 2 for 3/4. That is for ease of reading. It's much easier to read beats when they're beamed together, and the beaming makes sense. A good example to showcase the difference between these two meters is America from West Side Story. He's combining the 2 meters back to back throughout the whole song. So it's a measure of 6/8 followed by a measure of 3/4. I wanna be in America, I wanna be in America, da 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 da. 1 and a 2 and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and a 2 and a 1 and 2 and 3. And you might have noticed that each second bar, the beats go by faster. And Bernstein is having fun with this. He's playing with the listener. He's changing the meter. He's changing the metric of the music as it goes on. Every bar it's changing back and forth. Last slide, I talked about strong notes and weak notes. Let's talk about strong beats and weak beats. So meters not only tell you how many subdivisions in a beat, how many beats, how long the measures are, it's also implying that there are some beats that are stronger and some beats that are weaker. Normally, the first beat is stronger. To describe this, I like to use Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, the lyrics, poetry-wise, they use what is called common meter. There's also common meter in music. I want to talk about the common meter in poetry right now, which always alternates between weak note or weak syllable and strong syllable. And if you want to put that in music, ideally, you link the strong syllables with the strong beats and the weak syllables with the weak beats. And this is what happens with Amazing Grace. Because it starts with a weak beat, the second syllable has to be on beat 1. And this is what happens. They added a whole note before the first beat 1, because the maze in amazing is where the accent is. The emphasis is there. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The important words fall on beat 1, or syllables, fall on beat 1 on every measure, while the weak one falls on beat 3. They even take a longer, the strong syllables have 2 beats, whereas the weak ones have 1. It further emphasizes that alternation between the two. If I were to start on the first note, Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, that doesn't have the same ring to it if I do it that way. One exception to this is measures with 4 beats. Supposed to be beat 1 strong, beat 2, 3, 4 weak. But in practice, beat 3 tends to be strong as well. Theoretically though, beat 3 should be weak. Just to further on that weak beat for the first note of Amazing Grace, they add a note before the first bar. That's called a pickup note, or anacrusis. And they do that so that the meter is still very important. You don't want to mess around. And if you start on beat 1 with Amazing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, having the strong beat on 2 would make it much harder for you to count it while playing or while listening to it. For a fun little aside, common meter in poetry, just like Amazing Grace uses, can usually be sung to different tunes. So if you want to have a little bit of fun, you can try singing Amazing Grace to the theme of Gilligan's Island, and it will work. Feel free to pause the video, try it, have a giggle, and come back. So I think most of the important parts of meter have been covered. I just want to talk about a few cases that can be hard to know, whether they're simple or compound. Not because the music is hard to tell. Usually it's very easy to tell. But the time signature doesn't always help. The best example for that is 3/4. So 3/4 is usually a simple meter with 3 beats of quarter notes in the bar. But if you remember, for compound meter, we talked about a numerator being a multiple of 3. So here I could have 1 beat that is worth a dotted half note, and is subdivided in 3/4 notes, which with my notation would look like that. And this actually happens a lot. Most waltzes are done like that. They have one beat to a bar, and they have 3 subdivisions in every beat. And another one that is a good example is My Favorite Things from The Sound of Music. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens. Really is only one beat in the bar here. It's not really 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. You can count it that way, but it's not supposed to be 3 beats. It's supposed to be 3 parts of one beat with less emphasis. Beats imply some emphasis. If notes are within a beat, there's even less emphasis. So music like My Favorite Things should be seen as compound, not simple meter. I hope this answers a lot of your questions about meters, but if you have further questions, there will be a Q&A following this. I invite you to join and ask all of your questions. See you there.